Good evening, everyone. Before we dive into this story, I must warn you, this is not a fable about how luck smiles upon the humble girl. It's not about winning the lottery or inheriting a fortune. It's about a test, the most relentless and unexpected test I have ever faced. My name is Isabella Montez. At the time, I was just the anxious fiancée of a man about to inherit an empire, and my sole mission was not to mess it up. I was ready to pretend to be the cold, calculating version that his billionaire father expected. I had a script, a luxury outfit, and one golden rule: punctuality above all else. But as you will see, life rarely follows the script. On a cold afternoon, on my way to the meeting that would define our entire future, I made an impulsive choice. A choice that broke every rule, sacrificed my status, and led to a catastrophic delay. I was convinced I had ruined everything. I had traded the approval of one of the world's most powerful men for a simple act of kindness. What I didn't know was that this act of failure was, in fact, the only condition for success. What my fiancé saw as a catastrophe, his father saw as the only proof of character that mattered. This is the story of how a silk scarf and a cheese sandwich brought down the walls of a dynasty. Grab a drink and prepare yourselves, because the way the Vance family conducts an evaluation dinner is far beyond anything you can imagine. Let's go back to that fateful afternoon in the city of Ethel. The dinner invitation did not arrive as a simple social formality. It was a writ of summons issued by the immutable law of the patriarch. It arrived encrypted, cold, and bearing the seal of an elite New York law firm that only handled transactions spanning geographical boundaries. Mr. Elias Vance requests the presence of his son, Enrique Vance, and his companion, Isabella Montez, for a formal assessment on August 23rd at 5 p.m. at Eden Manor.
Punctuality is mandatory.
Absences or delays, even minor ones, will be interpreted as disinterest and will constitute immediate and irreversible disqualification. The word disqualification was underlined in blood red, metaphorically, in my mind. I knew I was being summoned to a tribunal where the penalty for failure would be total exclusion from Enrique's world. For 2 long years, Enrique and I lived under the chilling shadow of Elias Vance. The man was a myth in the tech sector, a ruthless titan who had built Vance Global from scratch in a Silicon Valley garage. After his self-imposed isolation a decade ago, he became a legend. An invisible king who commanded a $1 trillion empire from his fortress, Eden Manor, in the isolated and inaccessible town of Ethel, which seemed to exist only to serve his residents. Elias Vance had disinherited his eldest daughter, Clarice, for marrying a penniless artist he called a capital worm. Enrique's fear was justified. The precedent was cruel and known throughout high society. The pressure on him was existential. He didn't just fear losing the money. He feared losing the surname itself and the identity that being a Vance afforded him. The week of preparation was a descent into the hell of paranoia, marked by the constant smell of strong coffee and the smoke from electronic cigarettes. Enrique was no longer my fiancé. He was my trainer, my gentle executioner, obsessed with transforming me into a cold, polished replica of the woman he thought his father would approve of. Sleep was a luxury we both lost. He spent the nights reading aloud excerpts on European high society etiquette and quizzing me on fiscal policy and the bond market. "Isabella, my father is not content with good enough," he repeated, slamming his hands on the table, his eyes red and swollen from lack of sleep. "He is looking for the crack, the character flaw that might compromise the lineage. This is a genetic, social, and psychological test. He is ensuring your DNA doesn't contaminate the Vance legacy with emotional weaknesses. If he doesn't like you, he disqualifies me from the succession, and we are both out. There will be no second chance." The cruelty of those words made me question whether I truly loved Enrique or the idea of who he could be away from his father. The survival guide he handed me was detailed and inflexible. The attire of war was an obsession. The gray silk dress is classic and restrained. The silken cashmere scarf, a Chanel gift worth more than most people earn in 6 months, is the material proof that you understand the value of investment and status. Do not take it off for anything. It is your visible armor. If you are wearing it, you belong. The conversational minefields were strictly forbidden. Not a word about your work at the NGO. He believes charity is the opium of the incompetent, a form of resource wastage. Zero mention of your upbringing, your teacher mother, or your nurse father. He would call it proletariat origin. Keep the conversation cold, Isabella. Geopolitics, the gold trend, the next CEO summit in Switzerland. Topics that demonstrate you value power over pity and wealth over need. And the golden rule, the unbreakable law. He gripped my face, his touch pleading. You cannot be late. My father hates tardiness. He believes it is the mark of an undisciplined mind, a sign of lack of control and personal disrespect for his authority. Arrive before 4:55 p.m., sit in the taxi, and wait. It is the only way to survive. It is your one simple task, Isabella. On the morning of the dinner, my stomach was a twisted iron knot. Every hairpin, every crease of the silk, was meticulously checked for perfection. I felt like a porcelain doll, emptied of all my essence to fit into Elias Vance's box of approval. I was so focused on not failing the appearance test that the last act of humanity I would perform was almost an accident. I barely had time to pack the simple sandwich I had made for myself. I took the train to Ethel, the town Elias Vance had created to be the backdrop of his isolation. The town greeted me with an expensive, oppressive silence. The streets were lined with cold stone mansions, all with wrought iron fences and discreet surveillance. The air was heavy with the scent of pine and money. The plan was the taxi. But, stepping off the train, the weight of that silk dress and the stiffness of my hair were unbearable. I needed air, ground beneath my feet. I decided to walk the last stretch, seeking a moment of sanity before entering Elias Vance's theater. As I walked down the avenues, which resembled private parks, I checked my watch. 5 p.m. I was on the absolute limit. I quickened my pace, Enrique's fear the only thing driving me forward. It was then that I saw him, sitting alone on a bench in a perfectly manicured square. He was the only organic imperfection in the inorganic landscape of wealth. An elderly man, his beard long and dirty, his skeletal figure hunched against the cold. The afternoon breeze, cutting, made his thin, torn coat flap. The coldness in his clear, incredibly lucid blue eyes was what struck me most. He looked like he had seen far more of life than anyone else in Ethel. Enrique's voice screamed in my head, "Keep walking. Don't be late. Protocol, Isabella, protocol." I took 3 steps and stopped. The contrast was unbearable. Stupid wealth and pure suffering. I remembered the most important lesson from my mother, the basis of my NGO. Your honor is tested in the desert, where no one is watching and where there is nothing to gain. To hell with Elias Vance's rules. I turned and walked to the bench. The smell of dirt and cold grew stronger. "Excuse me, sir," I said, lowering my voice, my tone gentle. "Are you hungry?" He looked up at me, and what I saw was not subservience, but evaluative curiosity. He scrutinized me from my perfectly styled hair to my expensive heels. "It's been a while since I ate," he admitted, with dignified dryness. "And the rich around here prefer to pretend that need doesn't exist on their land." I took out my sandwich, my simple lunch, my only sustenance. "It's a plain cheese and turkey sandwich. It's all I have, but it's yours. Please take it." He hesitated, looking at the sandwich, then at me, as if deciding if I was genuine. Finally, he accepted it. His fingers were long, thin, almost aristocratic, despite the grime. "Thank you. Your kindness will be remembered. But tell me, young woman," he asked with an investigative tone, "are you not afraid? Afraid this gesture will make you late, or afraid I might be dangerous? This is not your neighborhood." "No," I said, looking directly into his eyes. "I am more afraid of becoming the kind of person who can pass by someone in need and not stop." Being late is a risk, yes, but it is a risk I choose to take. You are cold. I watched him shiver uncontrollably. The cold was glacial. My silken cashmere scarf, the symbol of my material worth, was warm around my neck. I unclasped it without hesitation. Please accept this too, I said, gently placing it over his thin shoulders. It's warm, and you need it more than I do right now. I can't leave you here like this. He touched the soft fabric. His gaze became intensely penetrating. You are willing to sacrifice what is most valuable to you right now, punctuality and appearance, for a stranger? You have an important event, don't you? Yes, I admitted. The most important of my life. You are a woman of character and noble soul, Isabella Montez, he said, using my full name with a strange but firm familiarity. Your attitude is the rarest of currencies. Don't worry, kindness always finds its reward. I smiled, wished him well, and started to run. I looked at my watch. 5:25 p.m. I was 25 minutes late for dinner. I had failed Enrique's test. But, for the first time all week, I felt like myself. The wrought iron gate of Eden Manor swung open, and I ran the final stretch of the long gravel drive. At the top of the white marble staircase stood Enrique, visibly shaking, his phone clenched in his hand. His face, when he saw me, hardened into a mask of silent fury. He ran to meet me, grabbing my wrist with the force of sheer panic. 27 minutes. You are 27 minutes late, he hissed, his voice a hoarse, desperate whisper, yet full of venom. You have signed our social death warrant. I am sorry, Enrique. I had to stop. There was a gentleman. He was freezing and starving in the square. I just couldn't walk past him. A beggar, he repeated, the words sounding filthy in his mouth. You risked Vance Global, the inheritance of a dynasty, for an empty act of charity? My father does not tolerate such sentimental weakness. He will see you as a risk. The panic peaked when he noticed my bare neck. Where the luxurious fabric should have been, there was only skin. Where is the scarf? Where is the symbol of status that I gave you? I told you not to take it off. I gave it to him, I said, my voice suddenly steady, contrasting with his hysteria. He was very cold. He needed it more than I did. Enrique completely lost control. You gave the Chanel silk and cashmere scarf to an indigent. That's a gift worth over $1,000. What is wrong with your priorities, Isabella? This is the test of your life. My father judges the fabric, the price, the appearance. And you show up here late, disheveled, and, worse, stripped of the only symbol of respectability that I insisted you wear. You are throwing our future into the trash for a cheap charity fairy tale. He gave me a slight push. You are a liability. You are not a partner. You are a burden I cannot afford to have. I knew this save the world mentality of yours would destroy us. Despite the pain, the cold peace remained. I did what was right, Enrique. And if your family cannot accept kindness, then perhaps the problem isn't mine. At that exact moment, Mr. Jardim, the butler, emerged onto the portico. His tall, skeletal figure looked like the herald of Judgment Day itself. Mr. Vance is in the dining room, Jardim announced, his voice perfectly neutral. Enrique frantically tried to smooth his hair.
Right.
We're going in.
Keep your mouth shut.
Don't mention the scarf. Please, Isabella, don't say anything stupid. Please, be my salvation. He pulled me through the door into the gloom of the entrance hall. The foyer was an echo chamber for my panic, a gallery of Carrara marble and priceless antiques. The butler guided us down the corridor, the sound of our footsteps the only noise. I was walking toward my execution. The low, raspy voice coming from the dining room was now unmistakable. It was the voice of the man in the square. The cadence, the inflection, the authority. The butler opened the doors. The dining room, vast and cold, swallowed us. At the far end of the mahogany table, seated in a chair that resembled a throne, was the solitary figure, Elias Vance. He was dressed exactly as I had left him, the ragged, worn clothes. And, around his neck, not for warmth, but as an insignia of honor, was my silk and cashmere scarf. Enrique, in shock, finally articulated, "Father, what are you doing? Why are you dressed like this?" Elias Vance ignored his son and fixed his clear blue eyes on me. He smiled. "Welcome, Isabella Montez," he said with authority. "I appreciate your demonstration of priorities. Please have a seat." The shock was too much for Enrique. "The beggar? That was the beggar? You gave my heirloom scarf to my father?" Elias Vance turned to his son, and his voice became colder than the marble floor, now fully the voice of the billionaire CEO. "Enrique, you did not surprise me.
You disappointed me.
You know that I value character, integrity, and the capacity for sacrifice above capital. It is the only pillar that sustains any lasting empire. And I spend hours disguised in the square, Isabella, testing the souls of those who approach my family. I have had princes and CEOs sit here," Elias continued, his voice rising. "They see poverty as an inconvenience and humanity as a risk. They do not stop. They do not take risks for a moral value." He looked back at me. "And so, today, this young woman," he declared, his voice soft, "whom you, Enrique, terrified about the importance of being cold and punctual, stopped. She did not calculate the risk. She gave the only food she had, and the only symbol of status you insisted she wear. She failed your superficial, pathetic test, Enrique. But she passed mine. The only one that matters for the future of this family and this company." Elias Vance gazed at me, his expression resolute. "Isabella, sit down. This is your place, at the right hand of power. We both have much to discuss about the vision for Vance Global for the next 20 years. I want to know in detail about your charity work, which Enrique forbade me from asking about." And then, to Enrique, who was in a catatonic state of shock, "You may stay and listen, son. But you are under her assessment now. You need to hear what true leadership is. Your evaluation is over." I walked the final meters to the head of the table, taking the seat of honor. The dinner unfolded like a board meeting, where I was the sole speaker and Enrique, the humbled listener. I spoke passionately about the social project, about the value of rebuilding communities, about the moral responsibility of big capital. Elias listened with fierce concentration, making notes in a small leather-bound book. He was not just testing me, he was absorbing my philosophy. "Your vision is not charity, Isabella," he concluded. "It is human capital. You are investing in the foundation of society. That is excellence." As dessert was served, Elias unclasped the scarf from his neck. "This is now a symbol of what is real," he said, handing it back. The fabric was warm. "Wear it always. It is proof that you chose the right path under pressure. It is your crest." Addressing his son, Elias Vance was final. "Enrique, you disappointed me, but your fiancé restored my faith. You were more focused on pleasing my ego than on protecting your partner. From this day forward, your place in this company is no longer guaranteed by birthright, but by your ability to honor and learn from Isabella. Her leadership is the moral compass of this company. She is the only reason you are not disinherited now." He looked at me seriously. "Isabella, you are my new advisor. You will not get a salary. You will get a percentage of equity. The wedding must be as soon as possible. I want this woman in the family to ensure the sanity and ethical future of Vance Global." Enrique could not speak. He simply stood up, pale, and left the room in silence. The drive back was a vacuum. When we arrived at our apartment, he broke down in tears. He begged for forgiveness, not just for the portico, but for all the years he had forced me to be someone else. It was the beginning of his redemption. 3 months later, we married. The ceremony was in my parents' humble garden. Elias Vance was there, dressed in a tailored suit, but around his neck, worn as a medal of honor, was my silken cashmere scarf. I had failed a test of appearance. But in failing it, I had triumphed in the test of character, winning the respect of a man who gave me the only inheritance that mattered, the certainty that kindness is the true power in a world addicted to ambition. Billionaire Elias Vance had become my greatest mentor, and beggar Elias Vance, my wisest judge. The epilogue of the story unfolded 6 months later. Isabella Montez was named Chief of Corporate Responsibility and Ethics at Vance Global, with unprecedented power to audit and veto projects that did not meet the highest moral standards. Enrique, redeemed, became her greatest ally, working to restructure the company's philanthropic foundations. He was learning to be a man of character. And so, we return to the present. The story of that dinner. And that scarf is not just the story of how I married a Vance or how I changed Vance Global. It is the story of a fundamental principle. The truth of our character is revealed in the small choices we make when no one important is watching. Elias Vance's test was cruel, but it was fair. He taught me that the risk of being kind is always outweighed by the reward of being authentic. That scarf, which was once worth a salary, is worth 3 times that today, because it represents my value. And the man who gave it and the man who received it became the 2 anchors of my life. Enrique, by my side, now leads with a compassion he never knew he possessed. He learned that the true inheritance is not in the stocks, but in the actions we take. Eden Manor is no longer the cold fortress. With the company's new focus on human capital, it has become the headquarters of our foundation. And you who listen to this story, let me ask you a question. What is your scarf? What is the object of value, the time, the status, or the comfort that you are hoarding out of fear that the universe is waiting for you to hand over to a stranger? The real test is not being on time for the meeting, but stopping for the one who is shivering. If this story touched your heart and made you reflect on the difference between appearance and essence, I have a request. First, leave your comment below and tell me, would you have stopped for that man? Would you have given him the scarf? Second, like this video and share it with someone who needs proof that kindness, in fact, pays the best rewards. Third, and of course, subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. Together, we will continue to explore stories where character is the true blank check. Thank you for watching. Remember, be kind. Always. And we'll see you in the next story.